Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Introduction to Portlets and Portals. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Jaspreet Singh, Architect, Rational Websphere Portal at IBM. Mr. Jaspreet Singh is an architect for Rational Websphere Portal Toolkit in ICS. His area of expertise spans across the WebSphere portal domain, Eclipse plugins technology, JEE and Web 2.0 frameworks. He has previously presented at RSDC 2008, PEC 2009, Innovate 2010, XWX Conference 2011 and XWX Conference 2012. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mr. Jaspreet.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Okay, so is the screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, thanks. Everyone, welcome to this session on portals and portlets. Essentially an introduction, a beginner's session. If you are new to portals, portlets, coming from JEE background, servlet background, then you're at the right place. I am Jaspreet. Thanks for that introduction. I'm the architect for IBM Rational Application Developer Portal Tools, which is the premier IDE or integrated development environment for creating applications for portals. So moving on to the next slide now, which is agenda. So this is how I have planned the talk to be like. We're going to be spending some time on the basics. Then we'll move on to why portals and portlets, when life was fine with JEE, what was the need for portals and portlets to come in. We'll then take a look at Portlets and JEE. Is there a way for them to come together? Do they intersect? Do they complement each other? What is the story between JEE and Portlets? We'll then move on to the JSR 286 specifications. For those who do not know what that is, hopefully we'll get to know by then. Next, we would cover certain portlet concepts, very basic concepts, and round it off with a demo on portlet development. And as I said, I'd like to reiterate once again, this is primarily going to be a beginner session. It is not going to be comprehensive. Do not expect a lot of information. That is the intent. I don't want to flood you with information. I just want to make sure that you find your feet, and hopefully this should be a stepping stone for the rest of you. I'll also give pointers and next steps for you to make sure that the session is fruitful and you can get the best out of it. All right, so let's see what a portal is. How do we define portal? So for the sake of understanding and just for the sake of an example, I will continuously refer to the example of iGoogle. We all know what iGoogle is, and in fact even the Yahoo home page for that matter. So these are very loosely speaking portals, wherein a portal can be defined as a doorway, a gate, or an entrance. Of course, that is a little meaning, but in context of technology, a portal is actually your window or the first point of access to any repository or any site For example, it could be even your intranet homepage of your company. As I said, iGoogle is again an excellent example of a portal. So what you get from a portal is a landing page which has multiple pieces of information embedded into it, and all of those typically not relate to each other. They are all disparate pieces just there, so you can choose the one you like, and it actually leads you to an individual path. A slightly technical way of putting it across is it is typically a starting point to information and applications. As I said, it applies equally well to the internet, where again iGoogle, Yahoo, etc. There are plenty of portals out there now. And of course, your intranet company website, which would have multiple pieces in place where you can access a whole bunch of information, be it your related information, be it your profile related information, be it anything. Portlets. What are portlets? So coming back to iGoogle, the closest example or instance of a portlet is the individual snippets you see on iGoogle. Although those are also called widgets, but very loosely speaking, portlets are a building blocks of a portal. So we'll define what a portal is. It's your doorway or entrance or a gateway to information applications. And a portal in itself is built up of multiple portlets. So why do we need portlets? The main benefit we get out of portlets is, in itself, a single portlet is actually a Java component on its own, which means it individually processes requests and it individually gives out a response. So again, as you can see on iGoogle, there are multiple windows there. So all those windows are actually examples of portlets. Again, technically they're not portlets, but from a UI perspective, from an end user perspective, this is how the portlet will manifest to you. Again, in a very layman term, if you're looking at a web page, if you are on a web page that qualifies as a portal, then the individual windows on that are called portlets. As I said, these are essentially Java-based components. They're pretty much same as servlets. In fact, I would go ahead and call them specialized servlets. They have some constraints on them, which sets them apart from servlets. And the biggest difference between a servlet and a portlet is a servlet would process request, and in turn, it would return you a complete web page or an HTML document as a response. Whereas portlets, ultimately, as I told you, ultimately a single portlet is going to fit into a portal page. It is going to form a small segment of the portal page or a web page, which means a portlet does not return an entire web page. It is always going to return back a small HTML fragment. So in that sense, servlets, portlets are similar because they all are Java-based. They process user requests, and while one of them, servlet, it generates the entire web page and gives it back to the browser. Portlets, however, they generate HTML fragments, which in turn are assembled together to form a portal page. On to the next slide now, specifications and containers. Now, we've all heard of this term called containers. May not be standalone individually. We've heard of terms like a servlet container. We've heard terms like an EJB container. So what are containers? Essentially, a container usually takes care of a web component. It manages the entire life cycle of the web of the component it contains. So in that sense, a servlet container manages servlets. It manages the entire life cycle of the servlets. EJB container does the same for EJB. So whatever container we're talking about, it manages the life cycle and the interaction of the external world with that component. So that is what a container is. And where specification fits is that the language or the protocol between the container and the component is actually the specification. So that is how the containers interact with their components. So essentially, if I were to define a servlet container, then I would say a servlet container is a program that implements the servlet specifications. Similarly, a container is the one that implements the EJB specifications. So this is a relationship between specifications and containers is. On to the next slide now. So what is a portlet specification? Well, first of all, there is a container called a portlet container. Just as we said, there is a servlet container, there is an EJB container, there is an entity called a servlet, a portlet container. And as I said a while ago, a portlet container is actually a software program that implements the portlet specifications. And portlet specifications, just like servlet specifications or EJB specifications or any other specifications, they actually let a portlet container communicate with portlets. So once again, portlet container implements the portlet specifications, and the specifications are the common language with which the portlet and its container they talk together. Now, the portlet specifications have been around for a while, just as any other specifications actually. So it started off with the IBM API, which was first portlet specifications. So IBM started off with this concept of portlets. At that time, as the name says, it was a proprietary API, which essentially means there was no other portlet container available in the market, because as I said, the API was proprietary, it wasn't open. So the IBM servers, again in a very layman term, were the only ones which were the portlet containers available in the market. But that changed after a while once JSR 168, which is also known as the Portlet Specification 1.0, was released. Now, the biggest advantage of releasing the portlet specs as a JSR was that it was open to the rest of the world. Now, what does that mean? What that essentially implies is the specifications were open to the vendors to create their portlet containers. That had a very big advantage. What that meant was, if you created a portlet which was implemented according to a specification, then theoretically speaking, you could run that portlet on any portlet container. So it's very similar to the concept of servlet. So if you create a servlet, then you can run it essentially on any servlet container of your choice from any vendor. The reason is because the servlet specifications are open. There are plenty of servers out there that implement the servlet specifications. Similarly, starting with JSR 168, which as I said was called Portlet 1.0, multiple vendors could manufacture their portlet container. So a portlet that was written once could be run on any portlet container. And this is the advantage of the power of having a common specification. If you have a container that implements a particular specification, that it does not matter for which container you're writing the component. Once you've written that component, as long as you can find a container, you can run it. So that made the portlets portable. So after GSR 168, GSR 286 came about. That was around 2007, 2008 when GSR 286 was developed, which essentially also is the latest portlet specifications that are out there. Again, there are many vendors which have the portlet containers implemented according to GSR 286 or version 2.0. Again, most of the portlets you would see which are being created now are being done according to the GSR 286 specs. Again, pretty similar to servlet specs. Most of the servlets that you would create, you would want them to be according to the latest specs. Similarly, Portlet 2.0 or GSR 286 is the latest specification of portlet. So again, just to very quickly summarize, portlet specifications, that is what helps a portlet as a component communicate with the portlet container. Portlet container in turn implements the portlet specification. The fact that portlet specifications started off as IBM API were proprietary meant that your portlets were written specifically for IBM portlet containers. Now, with GSR 168 and GSR 286 developed, multiple vendors entered the fray. They created their portlet containers, and your portlet, once written, could be ported across portlet containers. Okay, on to the next slide now. Now, if you've been noticing, I haven't used the word portal a lot. In fact, I'm mostly using the word portlet container. So what is the difference between a portlet container and a portal? For all practical purposes, they are essentially the same. However, there is a very big difference. A portlet container has to, doesn't have any choice, has to implement the portlet specifications. Period. It does not have any flexibility. Whereas a portal, in addition to being a portlet container, it also does significant additional tasks. Mind you, without which the portlet container does not have a real meaning actually. So mathematically speaking, I would say a portal is equal to a portlet container plus X. So what is that X? Now, if we go back to our initial discussion about portals, a portal is nothing but a collection of portlets, collection of windows, referred to ID. And as I said, a single portlet is actually a single web component, a single Java component. So a single Java component, a portlet, it accepts a request and it throws back an HTML fragment, which is corresponding to that particular portlet. So take an example of a portal on which I have, let's say, 6 windows. There's one for news, there's one for weather, there's one for travel, and so on and so on. There are 2 more. So there are 5 windows or 5 portlets. Now, these constitute a portal. So the 5 windows of 5 portlets individually will be throwing back their fragments. And they'll process the information depending upon what the outcome is, just as a servlet would, they would send back a response, which is essentially an HTML fragment. So between you as a user seeing the portal page as a collection of these portlets and this portlet throwing fragments back, the entity that sits between you and the portlet container is actually the portal. So what portlet container does, it throws back the fragments to the portal intercepts those fragments, it aggregates the fragments, it aggregates the portlets and assembles the portal page. And that is what the primary task of a portal is, which is aggregation. Mind you, in spite of aggregation being one of the most critical tasks for a portal, it does not form a part of portlet specifications, which means every portal is allowed to implement aggregation the way it feels like. It is not standardized across portlets, which actually does not make any difference. But the key to remember here is a portal contains a portlet container, which is very strictly what the portlet specifications are. It implements that. In addition to that, it provides other services. For example, the page aggregation being the foremost, where it aggregates the portlets, individual portlets, assembles the portal page, and sends it back to the user. Apart from that, there are additional tasks that a portal does. We're going to look at it in a while, but just for the sake of reference, aggregation, how the layout of the individual portlets is done, that is managed by portals. How individual rules are spelled out, how what content goes, who can see what content. These are all rules called personalization rules. This is all taken care by portals. Of course, administration and configuration part, managing your portlets, assigning permissions, etc., etc. So these are all things which do not fall under portlet container, but these are tasks done by the portal over on top of a portlet container. But as I said, for all practical purposes, a portal and a portlet container, they are usually treated as one. A very good example I can give is the IBM WebSphere application server is a portlet container, which means I can deploy or publish my portlets on IBM WebSphere application server, which means my IBM WebSphere application server is capable of starting my portlets and hosting my portlets so that they can process requests and give back a response. But what an IBM WebSphere application server cannot do for me is create a portal page. It cannot combine the output of various portlets and give me an aggregated output. And that is where the IBM WebSphere portal steps in. IBM WebSphere portal is actually a portal, and as I said, a portal sitting on top of portlet container. It gets all the fragments from the portlet container or the WebSphere application server, and it gives it back to the user. So if you have a portal, which is the IBM WebSphere portal, you would always have an IBM WebSphere application server running inside it. Because as I said, a portal will always have a portlet container inside it. All right, next slide. Now this is a very good blog diagram to explain some of the concepts that I was talking about. So the client is actually a web browser. So if you are a client or a web browser which is sending requests to, let's say, URL, maybe the iGoogle URL or probably your company intranet site, it reaches the portal. Then the portal dispatches that request to the portlet container. Now, why portlet container? If you notice, portlet container is the guy that is talking to the portlet applications running inside it. And if you also notice, blue rectangle is the portlet API or the portlet specification. And recall what I mentioned in the previous slide, portlet specifications is what lets or allows the portlet container to speak to the individual portlets. So the flow of information is the client or the browser sends the URL, you hit the URL in the browser, it reaches the portal then sends the information or the URL to the portlet container. Portlet container talks to the individual portlets. Individual portlets, they do the processing based on whatever the input is. They return the output, which is, mind you, HTML fragments. They are not web pages, they are HTML fragments. The portlet container gives back the fragments to the portal. The portal constructs the entire page. It fits in those fragments, assembles the entire portal page, and gives it back to the user. So this is how the entire thing pans out. Okay, next slide. Why portals? Actually, the earlier question that I had put up was why portlets. A big part of that answer is it actually lies in the answer to this question: why portals? The reason of why portlets is because portlets are the building blocks of a portal, and a portal has a bigger business case. So essentially, you would want to use portlets because portlets let you get services or let you avail services of a portal. So why do you need a portal? Next slide. Now, these are the various reasons for which you would want to get a portal. In a typical web application or a website that you would have, it is bound to have things like branding. By branding, I mean, your corporate logo, the headers, the footers, the coloring scheme, etc. So that is what theming and branding is. Navigation, how the flow of the website is, how to manage that. Search, most or almost every website that you go across offers you this ability to search the content. Of course, content, web content is probably the most critical part of the website these days. Targeted content. So what I mean by targeted content is, you must have been to the telecom sites like Airtel, Idea. So depending upon your geographies, you are shown campaigns which not entirely all the user base gets to see. So that is what is meant by targeted content. So what targeted content means is a content which is conditional based on certain rules. And also, as I said, a portal is essentially a composition of a lot of things. So you would want so if it's an intranet, company intranet, you would want the news to be there, you would want a link or probably some small hotspot of HR information to be there, and plenty of other things, so there are small hotspots which are there. So this needs to be all put together and aggregated. So, typically all websites would need to tackle this, the concepts of theming, branding, navigation, searching, the web content, the targeted content, and composition of all of this. So what typically we end up doing is implement this. Of course, the fact that there are websites which do this means that people are implementing these concepts. However, the problem with this is most of us do it in an ad hoc manner. There is no standardized way in which we go about doing it. And this is where a portal steps in. A portal is a specialized software which is designed to do exactly all of this. A portal will do theming and branding in your behalf. A portal will handle single sign-on on your behalf, so that you just log on to your portal and whatever backend applications, be it SAP, be it SharePoint, it does log in on your behalf and presents all the information to you on a single interface. You don't even get to know where all the information is coming from at the back end. Search, content, targeted content, composition, all of this a portal does for you out of the box and in a standardized way. So the difference is, if you use a portal, you are getting a product that does this day in and day out and in a standardized way. Essentially, a portal is a piece of software that has already solved these problems and is in a much robust shape, in a much better shape. It's been there for a while. It's a very stable, concept. The portal is a very stable concept. So if you were to implement all of this from scratch, Number one, it is going to be difficult, not impossible. I can assure you it's not impossible, but it's going to be very difficult. And number two, it's going to be a huge task for you to maintain all of this. So this is where a portal triumphs. If you use a web application server, fine, all of this is doable. But a portal is actually a specialized server designed to do all of this for you. It is meant to create and maintain such sites. And that is why we must take a look at portal or think about having a portal host our sites. Okay, the next slide is about portlets and JEE. So how about the other actors from Java Enterprise Edition, like say the EJBs, the web services, and the rest? Well, portlets in that sense are exactly like servlets. Just as your servlet can talk directly to a DB2, or probably talk to a DB2 via Hibernate or any of the intermediaries, just as your servlet can talk to a web service, just as your servlet can talk to a REST service, and just as your servlet can integrate with an EJB, a portlet can do all of that. So in that sense, portlets and servlets are exactly similar. So portlets, the key message is the portlets very seamlessly integrate with your JEE stack. And in fact, they let you bring together these two concepts, one being a portal and the other being a JEE. So in case you have an existing infrastructure which is primarily JEE based, portlets let you very seamlessly and transparently integrate the concept of a portal that front ends all of this with the back end, which is primarily JEE actors, which probably already exist for you. The other way of looking at it is, as I said, portlets throw back a fragment, which means just as a servlet, you require a JSP which will be sent back as a response. Of course, that JSP will essentially be a fragment HTML, not the entire HTML. Now, just as with servlets, as your servlets grow, there is a problem in managing servlets, which is where the MVC pattern comes in very handy. You have multiple flavors of MVC where your servlets can act as a controller. Similarly, portlets also participate in MVC patterns where portlets act as a controller, and popular UI technologies like JSF, probably one of the most popular, Struts and Spring. These can be very beautifully interlinked with the portlet, whereas your UI is actually either a JSF UI or a Spring UI or a Struts UI. So that's where portlets can take the entire integration to a different level. You can get all the benefits you want from JSF, from Spring, from Struts, and in addition, you can still use portals. In fact, most of our customers who are on portal and create portlets, very rarely they use plain vanilla JSPs, just as you would rarely have people using plain vanilla JSPs in servlets. We have customers who use JSF, plenty of JSF portal and portlets. And we have customers who use plenty of Spring with portal and portlets. Again, portlets, the fact that they are typically controllers, they fall beautifully into the MVC pattern and allow nice and a scalable integration with these JEE UI frameworks. Okay, so JSR 286 specifications. What was the main point or the highlights of the JSR 286 or rather Portlet 2.0 specs, which are the latest specs out there? Prior to JSR 286, with JSR 168, the main concern was, if your two fragments were to communicate with each other, so for example, consider you are on the intranet site and you want to search for some content. So what typically happens is the search dialog, the various fields, they are one portlet, and the result comes in to another portlet. So you have two different portlets. One of them is where you key in your criteria, you specify various parameters, and the search result comes or is displayed in another portlet. So what we want here is for these two portlets to communicate with each other, because portal is a paradigm where there is a more likelihood or more business case of the fragments wanting to interact with each other. Now the problem before JSR 286 was, of course, portlets did integrate and communicate with each other, but this communication was not mentioned or specified as a part of specs, which meant that almost all the portals did it in a proprietary manner, which further meant that, let's say, if I wrote a portlet and I wrote a JSR 168 portlet, and my portlets were doing eventing, and I created those portlets for IBM WebSphere portal. Now, tomorrow, if I wanted to package those portlets as a WAR or a EAR and deploy it on some other portal, not the IBM WebSphere portal, but the portal, it wouldn't work, because my portlets are using eventing, which has been implemented according to IBM WebSphere portal. It's proprietary. The other server would not recognize it. And this was a big problem, because as I said, eventing or coordination was a key requirement, and the spec did not have it. The JSR 2 problem was solved at two levels. One, it allowed eventing, and two, it allowed public render parameters. Now, in portlet lingo, public render parameters are nothing but your servlet request parameters. So what it means is, let's say if you have 5 portlets on a single page, then you can set one common request parameter which will be visible to all of them. A very beautiful use case, I'll give you an example. So for example, there is a travel portal, right? A travel portal where one portlet gives you the weather of a city, other portlet gives you the hotels available in a city. There's another portlet that gives you the cabs available in the city, and there's one portlet that gives you the information about the city. So what this public render parameter means is, if you set the city name as a public render parameter, in other words, which means you're setting this city as a request parameter which is visible to all the portlets, since it's public, then all the portlets will be able to read that city and show the content accordingly. So you'll see weather, which is similar to which is according to the city that was entered, maybe Delhi or Bangalore. The hotel portlet, so the hotels available in, say, Delhi. The information portlet will show information regarding Delhi itself. So the next time you change the city, say Bangalore, all the portlets will update them. This is a very powerful concept, because you have different windows, different portlets giving you entirely different information. It has nothing to do with each other, but with a single request parameter, public render parameter, you can make all of them work in a coordinated manner. And that is where JSR 286 specification really trounced. It brought about significant coordination features to eventing and public render parameters. There's one more huge concept that was introduced in JSR 286, AJAX. Most of us know AJAX. You require URL in AJAX, so you can hit that URL and get a partial response. Now, portal, it encodes all URLs. The thing with the portal is you cannot directly address a portlet. You can directly address a servlet using various ways. For example, in a form, you can mention which servlet you want to hit. You do not have that luxury with portlets and portals. Now, what JSR 286 did using resource serving was, it for the first time allowed you to address a particular portlet. That in turn created the AJAX support, the AJAX use cases. Before JSR 286, a workaround was used to support AJAX in portlets, which is you always had to insert a servlet along with portlets for the AJAX in use case to happen. But JSR 286, it changed that, it allowed AJAX to be workable at the specification level. A quick reference to the composite capability preference profiles, which is CCPP profile or CCPP support, which essentially gives or allows you to have information regarding the client. So now this is a very significant feature. Now that we are developing portal and portlets for mobile devices, I as a portlet developer can use the CCPP profile to not only know what the request is coming in from, but also know the kind of device it is coming in from. So I can distinguish between, if it is an Android device, I can even distinguish between the resolution, the screen size. I can go down to that level. So in that sense, the CCPP profile gives me a lot more detail about the client and allows me to handle the request accordingly. Okay, a very quick look at the portlet concepts. Now, what you're looking at is actually a sequence diagram, and this is a sequence diagram of submission. Now, there is a difference in the way servlets behave and in the way portlets behave when a submission takes place. So I'd like you to pay close attention to this. So we have an example of 3 portlets, portlet A, B, and C on a portal page. So what happens? Somebody presses or submits a form in, let's say, portlet A. So you have a portal page. There is a portlet A, which probably has a form. There is a portlet B, and there is a portlet. So somebody pushes a button or does an action on portlet A. In portlet specification, it is called process action. So the client request comes in. Portlet container, as I said, they can be treated together. So the portal or the portlet container intercepts the client request. It in turn calls process action on portlet A. Now, if you compare this with the servlet, process action is the same as do post. So just as a button submission will call a do post in a servlet, it calls a process action on portlet A. So portlet A does the processing, it returns control to the portlet container and portal. Now, if you notice, a fresh request goes to all the portlets. So portlet A gets a render request. Again, comparing with servlets, servlets have do get, and portlets have a render. So what the portlet and portal is trying to do is, okay, it asks portlet A to process the button submission. Having got the response back, it now asks all the portlets, portlet A, B, and C, to render their content fresh. So it generates a fresh request and asks all of them to give their fragments back. Now this is an important concept. The reason why this is done is, consider the example of a travel portal I just mentioned. So for example, I have a portal A, which is a search box. I have it has a drop down, let's say, for a country, so I choose India, and has a drop down for city, and I choose Delhi, and then hypothetically assume I have a submit button. So I press the submit button. So what happens? The portlet A, it does some processing. Now portlet B is assuming a weather portlet that needs to show information or weather according to what city was chosen in portlet A. Portlet C is maybe a Wikipedia page that shows information about the city, whatever city was chosen in portlet. So the point here is, once an action is done in portlet A, the portal has to allow or give portlet B and C a chance to refresh themselves to send fresh response back as a result of what happened in portlet A. So if portlet A says, okay, I am accepting Delhi as a parameter, then portal says, okay, portal B, portlet A got Delhi, what do you have to do? Give me your markup. So portlet B processes Delhi and sends back the response, which is probably the weather information for Delhi. And then it asks portlet C, okay, portlet C, portlet A accepted Delhi. What do you have to do? Do you have something to give to me? And portlet C gives back the markup for, let's say, Wikipedia information for the species that was selected in portlet A. So again, this is, since a portal page is an aggregation of different portlets, even if you are interacting with one portlet, you are submitting form in one portlet, it will refresh the entire page. The portal will refresh the entire page, rebuild the entire page, and send you back the response. Now, the other key point to note here is, if you are submitting a form in a servlet, this is one request that goes in, do post, and comes back. However, if you notice in a portlet, there are two requests. If you notice, there are two blue rectangles. There's one on top and there's one on bottom. There is an action request. As you can see the comment, there is an action request in which only portlet A processes, and the other fresh request that the portal originates is the render request, which is serviced by all the portlets. So the post in a portal, the get HTTP post in a portal actually leads to two different requests on the server side. Whereas an HTTP post in a servlet only has a single request. So that is the main difference between servlets and portlets. All right, so let's take a look at the portlet development demo. What I have is this back. This is the Rational Application Developer, which is the IDE for creating portlet applications. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly create a portlet application, and I'm going to show you why you need an IDE like RAD, or why, how RAD really makes your life easy while developing portlets. So we're not going to go into a lot of details here. So I'll very quickly create a portlet project so we can just focus on the main things. So I go to File, New. For those of you who are familiar with RAD or probably even Eclipse, this should sound as if you've actually operated. So this is where I choose the portlet project, File, New, Portlet Project, which brings up the new portlet project wizard. Again, the concept of wizard is very common in Eclipse and RAD. So I'll give a name, call my portlet. Target runtime is the portal server where I will publish this portlet to. So I look at it and say IBM Web Portal version 8 is where I'll be publishing this portlet. If you come down, I'm going to create a portlet. The name of the portlet is by default the same as the name of the project, which is my portlets. Configuration is JSR 286. Again, let me just show you. I'll modify this button. And there are a couple of things here. On top is the portlet API. So if I pull down this drop-down thing, it shows me different options. So there is one IBM Portlet API, which has been around for a while and it's replicated. And I have a JSR 168 and a JSR 286. So of course you can choose anyone, but advisable and very highly recommended is JSR 286. So you choose JSR 286. Portlet type is also very interesting. This is where you choose the kind of UI you're generating. For example, we're supporting faces, which is the JSF, and which will not generate any UI actually, and basic is where you get the plain vanilla JSP. So if you want to have JSF UI, you can choose faces portlet. So the JSPs, etc., all of that will be generated according to the JSF concept. So in case you're choosing JSF2, you will not get JSPs, you'll get faces. So I'll choose basic portlet. Say OK and finish. So once this finishes, if you keep a close eye in the Enterprise Explorer, it will generate two projects. One is the Portlet project and the other is the EAR corresponding to the Portlet project. The reason is that RAD publishes or pushes off this Portlet project as an enterprise archive, which is also generated for you. All right, so the Portlet is created. Now there are three main artifacts, three main actors in every Portlet project. I'll quickly show you that. First one is the one that is opened up by default in this editor here. This is, as the name says, my portlets portlet view.jsp. This is the JSP or the fragment which will show up on the portal page. Just take a look at the editor. If you look at the source, which is the bottom half, it doesn't have the HTML tag, it doesn't have the body tag, doesn't even have the head tag, and that is because, as we saw, portlets only have HTML fragments. They do not contain the entire HTML block. So there are no HTML tags, body tags, or head tags. It is just a fragment. Right. So this is the first key artifact, which is the JSP or the primary view that you see in a portlet. So my portlets, whenever I see it in a portal, this is what I'll see as the UI, which we'll take a look at in a while. So JSP is one, the first key artifact. The other, if I go into Java resources here, is this Java file called myportlets.portlet.java, which is, as the name says, the Java class sitting behind for the portlet. Just as for any servlet, you have a servlet class. For a portlet, I have a portlet class. Now recall that your servlets primarily extend from HTTP servlet. My portlet extend from generic portlet. Again, a very useful abstract class. It implements all the necessary functions so that my class, whatever I'm extending, I don't need to implement all the methods which are there in the portlet interface. So again, as you can see, this portlet class has been generated. There is an init method. Let me show you very quickly. So if you look at the methods, there is an init method here, which is the initialization of the portlet, just as you would have for a servlet. There is a do view, which is, very loosely speaking, just as your do get in the render part of the portlet. And process action, as we saw, is the same as do post. Now, what the key takeaway here is, in addition to the fact that this is a portlet class that sits behind a portlet, just as a servlet class would do, it extends from generic portlet class. So it takes away a lot of pain as far as the implementation of the portlet is concerned. The main takeaway is, if you're creating a portlet within RAD, this all is generated for you out of the box. So you don't need to type in a lot of things. Also, of course, you get all the freebies that we extend as a part of any IDE. So code completion is there, auto code completion is there, syntax checks are there. So in a nutshell, your job for developing portlets is very easy when you're doing development in IBM Rational Application Developer. So this was artifact number 2. Number 1 was the JSP, which is the view for the portlet. Number 2 important artifact is this Java class, the portlet Java class. And the third and the most important artifact is the portlet deployment descriptor, which is nothing but the portlet.xml, just as you would have a web.xml. So a portlet.xml, just like all nice XML files, it captures these specifications. So if I go to this source tab here, this is how the XML looks like, just as pure XML. This is how the portlet specs actually feel like in an XML file. However, in RAD, you don't need to go into the source view and tackle the HTML. You can use this UI-driven portlet deployment descriptor interface, which really makes the task of dealing with this text very easy. For example, there are different tabs available. So if I go to this portlets tab here, there are things like portlet name, portlet class, language, etc. So for example, display name. Let's say I want to change this display name. I want to make give a space and maybe also call, maybe put XYZ at the end. So if you see, I'm just dealing with a nice UI with a nice form shaped format, just as I would do in forms. Now what this did is if I go to the source, here you go. There is a tag called display name, and the changes I did in the UI were reflected in the XML file as well. So again, Portlet XML, a very key artifact, and RAD offers me a very easy, intuitive way of dealing with all the aspects of specification. So for example, events. One way of adding events is to go and type those events. The other easy way is to click add here, and my event gets generated. New event is the event that has been generated. So to go to source, right down below, if you notice, the event has been generated for me. So I did not need to know the portlet specs because I did not need to type the XML. All I had to do was go into this UI and add an event. So this is the third key artifact, JSP, Java file, and the portlet.xml. What next? Let's publish this onto the portal and let's see how an actual portlet looks like. So for that, I'll invoke the context parameter context menu, choose run as, an option says run on server, and I have a portal 8 running on my machine. I'll choose that and say finish. Now, once the portlet publishes, what RAD will do is it will automatically create a sample portal page and put this portlet on that and show me how this is going to look like on a portal. So again, this takes away a lot of tasks if I'm doing the development or unit testing, because otherwise I would need to publish this on the portal and create a portal page, then add this portlet to the portal page. If I'm publishing this through RAD, all of this is done. There you go. So I can see my portlet that I just created. It's called my portlet, and there is a sample form that is already generated. So the portlet that we generate of type basic, it creates a sample form for you. So if I enter an ID like ABC and say submit, there you go. The UI updates and gives you the message back. Anyway, this is how a portal looks like. This is how my portlet looks like on a portal. Of course, this is a single portlet on a portal. The actual scenario is for multiple portlets to exist on a portal, but this was a very quick introduction into the world of portlets. So, yeah. So we saw what portlets are, what portals are, some key concepts, and code-wise, what all it means. So it wasn't all theoretical gibberish. We also saw what portlets look and feel like. We saw the JSP, we saw the Java code, and we also saw the portlet.xml. So before I turn over the control back, excuse me, that is my email ID. In case you have further questions, further queries, any other concern regarding portals or portlets, feel free to drop me a note. I will respond as soon as I can. And for those of you who I have managed to get very interested, please visit our site Developer Works, IBM Developer Works, which is ibm.com/developerworks. We have plenty of articles on portlets, some basic, some intermediate, some advanced, but you would find plenty of articles to keep yourself busy, to take the next step and use this session as a foundation and get into the world of portals and portlets. I can assure you, portals can really make a hell of a difference to your life and your website. Okay, I think now we can be open for question and answers. Okay, there are many questions here. Let me try to answer some of them. Okay, there's a question from Sachin. It says, is portlets refer to the composite view design patterns in JEE? So Sachin, very simplistically speaking, yes to some extent, and no as well. So there is, it is probably deeper than that, but yes, from a very simplistic point of view, yes, you can compare, portlets as as a fact that there is a composite and these are small components that fit into that. Okay, there's a question from Anshuman Mishra. How the servlets are handled while creating and debugging a web portal. Okay, Anshuman, the first-class citizens of a portal are actually portlets. So what you see at the end of the day, you only interact with portlets. In turn, these portlets can talk to servlets, just as they would to any other JEE component. So, that's how it is. So the portlets, you never see a servlet surface to you directly. So you'll always go via a portlet actually. Okay, there's another question from Sachin. It says, can't we achieve the same concept of portlet using Ajax on web page? I think yes, you can, but there's a lot of other things that go in with a portlet. So the fact that there are portlets that are bringing in a various amount of information from various backends, it means that you would do it in a much better way if all these fragments were actually Java components in their own right. As I said, the concept of portlets is not new. You already have multiple avatars, and you can also implement it any which way. But having them as portlets and having the whole thing as a portal, it actually standardizes the whole thing. This is probably, we feel, one of the best ways to handle a concept like a portal where multiple things are put together on a single page together. Again, an exact answer will probably be a lot deeper than that, but again, I'm talking at a very high level here. Naveen Kumar has a question that says, can a portlet be combined with a servlet? Absolutely, Naveen. As I said, a portlet can be combined with any JEE component at the back end. In fact, not just JEE, we also have an example where we have integrated portlets with SharePoint, with SAP. So absolutely anything, a portlet, that is the best part of a portlet. It lives in a portal, and it can integrate anything that is there under the blue skies, even if it is Java-based thing or even a .NET-based thing. You can surface anything into your portal. So a portal in that sense can be your primary UI medium, and anything at the back end, your legacy apps, they can all be very seamlessly integrated into a nice UI experience for your end users. Okay, so Muhammad Amanullah has a question that says, what are the other containers available in the market for portlets? A lot of them, Muhammad. Let me see, do I remember? Yes, LifeRay is there. SharePoint is also a portlet in some sense. Oracle has a portal. So, if you Google for it, portlet containers and vendors, you'll find the exhaustive list which is available out there. Absolutely, Akshay. LifeRay is a portal. Shantanu has a question that says, what are the tasks under portlet specification? Again, Shantanu, essentially a portlet specs, like a servlet specs, is dealing with the life cycle of a portlet. So things like bringing up the portlet, servicing the request, then taking the portlet down, absolutely the same as servlet. In that sense, they are absolutely the same. Okay, there is another question from Anshuman Mishra. HTTP servlet, how the Java server page interprets the scriptlet from the server as far as compiling a portlet is concerned. I'm not sure I've understood this question, Anshuman, I'm sorry. I'll take the next one now. Anshuman has another question that says, can a portlet container be called as API redirected event generator when debugged in one part of a web archive class in an IDE. Again, Anshuman, I'm not sure I understood that question. You'll have to excuse me again. Anshuman Mishra has another question. Do JSF are debug? Absolutely, Anshuman. Every portal application that is deployed on a portal is debugged. It is debuggable. And as I said, most of our customers use JSF portlets, and we debug those JSF portlets day in and day out. So yes, they are debugged. Anshuman has another question. Is it necessary to have a cookie handling mechanism for JSR 286 when compiled for all the 3 parameters for it? 3 parameters. I'm not sure I understood this one as well. Anshuman, sorry for that. Okay, Sachin says, as per the sequence diagram of portlet concepts, all the portlets are refreshed on process action. Doesn't it impact the performance of a web page? Very good question, Sachin. It is a typical trade-off between performance and functionality. Of course, you are absolutely right. A complete page refresh means a big round of processing, but as I give you an example of a travel portal, without it, your portal will just not work. This is how it works. Your portlets need to refresh. However, we as IBM SL Portal have understood and realized this concept, and what we've done over the time is we've really optimized this process. So we also came up with a feature in Portal 7 where we did not refresh the entire page, but we only refresh the portlets that were impacted. So the portal is smart enough to know, okay, which portlets need refreshing. So only those portlets are refreshed. So to answer your question, yes and no, it does impact the performance, but it is a necessary evil. And the portal at maximum, what they are doing is they are optimizing that as we speak. Okay, Nageshwar has a question. How do I navigate from one page to another in JSR 286 portlets? Good question, Nageshwara. You have navigation APIs. Again, there are portal APIs that let you create URLs. So you have a rendered URL, you have an action URL. Of course, you have URLs at the page level as well. So those APIs are there. Just look up for navigation APIs in developer works, and you will know how to navigate from one page to another. Again, your question is, there are multiple meanings to this question. So again, I'll need to know more about this to answer your question perfectly. Larson Raja has a question. Are portlets like Ajax enabled servlets in behavior? Yes and no. As I said, simplistically, if you look at the portlets from the end user perspective, you can look at them any which way you want. But the key message is, at the back end, these portlets are much more than that. So yes, if you look at it from a layman, non-technical point of view, yes, they can be called Ajax enabled servlets, but actually they are much, much more than that. Rakesh Krishnan has a question that says, WebLogic portals and WebSphere portals, which is better? Good question, Rakesh. I can be allowed a liberty to be biased for IBM, so I would say WebSphere portal. I cannot comment on WebLogic, but WebSphere portal has been the market leading portal for a while now. We have, the Gartner study that comes out, and portal has consistently been ranked among the top products. So, I would say definitely IBM WebSphere portal. Shiv Kumar has another question, which is, this RAD is language dependent. By language, what do you mean? C++, Java? If yes, you can do anything in RAD. It is essentially Eclipse. So you can do C, C++ in Eclipse also, and Java also. If you meant language from local point of view, of course, there is internationalization and all is all built in. I hope I answered that well. Ravi has another question. Can we have servlet along with portlet in the same portal page? Absolutely, Ravi. But as I said, your primary medium of interaction will always be a portlet. Let me tell you one thing. When you have a portlet, you do not have a use case for a servlet, period. If you're using portlets, there is no reason why you should be even considering servlets. Larsen Raja has another question. Okay, let me see. Where is the question? Yeah, if portlets can be integrated with servlets, where do the servlets live? Do servlets are maintained by web portals? No, not at all. As I said, portals only recognize portlets. You can deploy servlets, but those are deployed at the application server level. Your portals will not recognize portlets. Mahesh has a question. I have heard about one of the frameworks called Liferay, which is also used for portlet development. Is this RAD development also the same or similar thing? If not, what is the difference between them? Mahesh, RAD is not, Liferay is not a portlet development framework. It is actually a portal. So if your question is, can I use RAD for developing portlets for Liferay? I'm afraid not. You know, we've optimized portlet development in RAD for IBM website portals only. So, you know, you can create portlets for all portals, but if you're using RAD, you know, they would work best with IBM website portal itself. Okay, I guess that's, okay, there's one more question that was just popped in. It is from Jyoti Ranjan Nayak. Is JetSpeed a portlet development component? Which one is better, RAD or JetSpeed or Liferay? Thanks. Again, not sure what JetSpeed is, but RAD and Liferay, huge difference. RAD is an IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment. It lets you create portlets. Liferay is a portal. It's a runtime component. It's a server. So one is an IDE, one is a server. Just an IBM portal is a portal. Liferay is a portal. RAD is a tool. It's a toolkit. You know, it's just like Eclipse. You use Eclipse or RAD to create portlets. So again, there's a huge difference between RAD and portals like Liferay or website portal. Okay, that's it. I guess we've answered all the questions. I thank you so much for the time and patience. I hope this session was really useful for you, fruitful for you, and this should really encourage you to take a look into this whole world of portals. There's plenty of resources out there, as I said. There's plenty of portals out there. I'll of course recommend IBM website portals for the obvious bias, but you just get into portals, you'll feel the difference.
Well, thanks so much for the insightful presentation, Mr. Jaspreet. I'm really thankful to you for conducting this webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of this session would be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great evening.